My twin brother framed me for plagiarism, using fake screenshots with my name on them. When I called him crying, he cut me off and said, "Guess Berkeley isn't working out for you after all." I just sat there, numb. That was last Easter. This week, he was sentenced to 8 years in prison. I've always been slightly better than my twin brother at pretty much everything. In 8th grade, when we ran the 100-meter sprint during field day, Blake finished in 13.35 seconds. I finished in 13.23 seconds. In 9th grade, when Blake's report card was straight A's, mine were always A+. And when we applied to colleges, Blake got into the University of Michigan. I got into the University of California, Berkeley. It wasn't like I was doing it on purpose. Heck, sometimes I would even try to perform worse than usual just so he could let go of his resentment. But it never worked. So by the time we left for college, he pretty much hated me. I could tell because he always hung up my phone calls, ignored my texts, and blocked me on social media. I never blamed him for it, though. So whenever we both came home for the holidays, I tried to shower him with gifts I knew he needed, and girl advice. Usually, he just ignored me or gave me the cold shoulder, until one day when he finally caved. It was the day before Thanksgiving, and we were all sitting in the living room when Blake barged in with a huge smirk plastered on his face. "Guys, come into the kitchen. I made something for us all." We followed him and proceeded to eat the most delicious chicken Alfredo we ever tasted. I literally almost cried, it was so good. "Bet you couldn't make this, huh, Noah?" he asked me. "Absolutely not," I exclaimed. "This is the best thing I've ever tasted." That same day, Blake unblocked me on everything and even followed me on Instagram. He had finally found something he was better than me at, and I was relieved. The rest of Thanksgiving was amazing, and when I got back to my dorm, I was so inspired by Blake that I started cooking more extravagant dishes. Nothing crazy, just followed a few recipes here and there. After a few months, I felt pretty confident in my cooking, and I knew that there was no way I could be better than Blake, so I felt secure in calling him. "Oh, so you think you're that good? You should join this competition when you come home for Easter. We'll see who's good." He then hung up. Well, I somehow mistook his overly sharp and harsh tone for playfulness, so I applied. A part of me was actually excited to lose, just so Blake could have his moment in the spotlight. Fast forward 2 months later, and we were both back at home, planning for the competition. Well, kinda. I let him take the kitchen while I just sat on the couch, watching videos of people cook. As I said, I literally wanted him to win. So even as he bragged about how I'm totally effed, I agreed with him. Told him he had it in the bag, that he was the GOAT. And on the day of the competition, he was straight up shot-talking me. "Did your little GPA teach you how to season food? You look so pathetic right now, it's embarrassing that we even share the same last name," are all things that came out of his mouth. It got so bad our competitors came up to me and asked if I was okay. And I had to tell them it was just my twin brother. His comments were deep and personal, and they hurt. But I figured if they made him happy, it was worth it, because I just wanted us to be a family again. The competition was actually fun. I tried to just enjoy the process. Meanwhile, whenever I looked over at Blake, I swear I could see beads of sweat rolling down his forehead. Then came judgment time. Blake came second, and his beady eyes stared at me as he went to get his award. I could literally see the corners of his lips turned upwards. Then came the announcement for first place. Noah Donaldson. Blake's face fell. I went red. After clarifying that it wasn't a mistake, I went up for my award. Blake looked so upset, I wanted to give him a hug. But instead, I mentioned him in my speech, said that he was my inspiration, that I wouldn't have been there without him. All the cliches. But as I spoke, I watched as his fists turned white from clenching so hard. His eyebrows were pulled all the way down. His entire body was completely tense. Fear ran through me. And as soon as I finished my speech, Blake lunged at me for a hug. "I'm so proud of you. Well done." His tone was overly sweet, like sticking your tongue into a bag of sugar. I just accepted his surface-level kindness, never letting my guard down. And, aside from a few dirty looks from Blake, the rest of Easter went smoothly. It wasn't until I returned to college that my life went downhill, because they kicked me out. And when I found out why, I didn't care about Blake's feelings anymore. I was ready to ruin his life. "Mr. Donaldson, we need to discuss some serious allegations that have been made against you," the dean said, sliding a folder across the desk. I opened it and felt my stomach drop. Inside was a formal complaint accusing me of cheating on my midterms. There were screenshots of text messages supposedly showing me arranging to buy test answers. My name was there, but I'd never sent those messages. "This isn't me," I said, my voice shaking. "I've never cheated on anything in my life." They didn't believe me. The evidence looked convincing. Someone had gone to a lot of trouble to make it seem legitimate. The university suspended me pending an investigation. I was told to pack my things and leave campus within 48 hours. I called my parents in tears. They were shocked and confused, but promised to help figure things out. Then I called Blake, thinking he might offer some brotherly support. He answered on the first ring. "Hey Noah, how's it going?" he asked, sounding weirdly cheerful. "Blake, I'm being kicked out of school. Someone framed me for cheating, and that's terrible." He cut me off, but something in his voice was off. He almost sounded pleased. "Guess Berkeley isn't working out for you after all. Maybe you should have gone to Michigan, like me." That's when it clicked. The timing was too perfect. The fake evidence too detailed. The way he seemed happy about my situation. "Did you have something to do with this?" I asked directly. "What? No. How could I possibly get you kicked out of a school school across the country. He laughed, but it sounded forced. Look, I gotta go. Good luck with all that. He hung up before I could respond. I sat in my half-packed dorm room, stunned. My own twin brother had set me up. I didn't know how he'd done it, but I was certain Blake was behind this. The realization hit me like a truck. His resentment went way deeper than I'd thought. I spent the next few days in a daze, moving back home while my parents tried to help me appeal the university's decision. My mom suggested I talk to Blake directly when he came home for the weekend, thinking there must be some misunderstanding. I agreed, but not because I thought it was a misunderstanding. I wanted to confront him. When Blake walked through the door Friday evening, he acted completely normal, asked how I was doing with fake concern, told our parents about his great grades this semester. It was surreal watching him pretend to care while knowing he'd just destroyed my academic career. That night, I waited until everyone was asleep. Then, I snuck into Blake's room and shook him awake. "We need to talk," I whispered. "Now." He blinked at me, annoyed. "What's your problem?" "I know what you did," I said, keeping my voice low. "The fake cheating evidence. That was you, wasn't it?" A slow smile spread across his face. In the dim light from the hallway, it looked almost sinister. "Prove it," he whispered back. "Why would you do this to me? I'm your brother." Blake sat up in bed. "You've been showing me up our entire lives. Every single thing I do, you have to do it better. Even when I finally found something I was good at, you had to take that from me too. The cooking competition? I wasn't even trying to win." "Sure you weren't," he scoffed. "Just like you weren't trying to get better grades or run faster or get into a better college. It just magically happened, right?" I stared at my twin, this person who shared my DNA but felt like a complete stranger. "So what now? You've ruined my education. Are you happy?" Blake leaned in closer. "This is just the beginning, Noah. You took everything from me. Now I'm going to take everything from you." The cold determination in his voice sent chills down my spine. This wasn't just sibling rivalry anymore. My own brother had declared war on me, and I had no idea how far he was willing to go. As I stood there in the darkness of his room, I realized that the person who knew me best in the world had become my worst enemy. The thought was terrifying. I left Blake's room that night with my mind racing. I couldn't sleep at all. My own twin brother had just admitted to sabotaging my entire college career. And worse, he'd threatened to keep going. I spent the whole night staring at my ceiling, trying to figure out what to do next. The next morning at breakfast, Blake acted completely normal. He chatted with our parents about his classes, laughed at our dad's lame jokes, and even asked me to pass the orange juice with this fake smile. I felt like I was in some weird alternate reality where only I knew the truth. "Noah, honey, you've barely touched your food," my mom said, looking concerned. I mumbled something about not being hungry and excused myself. As I left, I caught Blake smirking at me behind our parents' backs. That smirk haunted me for days. My appeal with Berkeley was going nowhere fast. The evidence against me looked too convincing. Someone had created fake screenshots showing me arranging to buy test answers, and they'd even included details about my schedule and professors that made it seem legitimate. I knew it was Blake, but I couldn't prove it. I tried explaining to the academic review board that I was being framed, but they just gave me these pitying looks, like I was a desperate cheater making excuses. One administrator actually said, "Mr. Donaldson, we see this all the time. Students panic when caught and claim conspiracy theories." My parents were supportive, but confused. They knew I wouldn't cheat, but they also couldn't believe Blake would do something so horrible. "They're twins," I overheard my mom telling my dad one night. "Why would Blake hurt his own brother like that?" Why indeed? The question kept me up at night. About a week after my confrontation with Blake, I got a call from Casey, my roommate at Berkeley. "Dude, the weirdest thing happened. Some guy came by asking for you yesterday. Said he was your cousin." "I don't have a cousin visiting," I said, immediately suspicious. "Yeah, I figured. He looked a lot like you, though. Anyway, he wanted to get into our room to pick up something you left behind." I told him no way. My blood ran cold. What did he look like exactly? Casey described Blake perfectly. My twin had actually flown to California to try to get into my dorm room. But why? What was he looking for? Or worse, what was he planning to plant there? I thanked Casey and hung up, my mind spinning. This wasn't just about the cheating accusation anymore. Blake was actively working to destroy me. I needed to figure out his next move before he made it. I decided to do something I never thought I'd have to do. I started investigating my own brother. I created a fake Instagram account and followed all his friends. I looked through his public posts for clues about what he might be planning. I even called a few mutual friends from high school to casually ask if they'd heard from Blake lately. That's how I found out about Megan. She was in Blake's economics class at Michigan, and according to our old friend Taylor, Blake had been totally obsessed with her for months. I found her Instagram and saw that she was pretty in that girl next door way. Lots of photos of her studying in coffee shops or hiking with friends. Nothing that screamed willing accomplice in destroying someone's life. But then I noticed something odd. In her most recent post, she'd tagged her location at a coffee shop near Berkeley. What was a Michigan student doing in California during the middle of the semester? I decided to take a risk. I messaged her from my real account. "Hey, you don't know me, but I think we need to talk about Blake Donaldson." She responded almost immediately. "Who is this?" "I'm Noah, Blake's twin brother." There was a long pause before she replied, "Blake doesn't have a brother. He told me he's an only child." That hit me like a punch to the gut. Blake was erasing me from his life story. But why involve this girl? I asked if we could meet in person, and surprisingly, she agreed. The next day, I met Megan at the same coffee shop from her post. She looked nervous, constantly checking her phone. When I walked in, her eyes widened. Obviously, seeing someone identical to her boyfriend, but claiming to be a brother she'd never heard of, was shocking. "I can prove we're twins," I said, sitting down across from her. I pulled out my driver's license and some old family photos I'd brought along. She studied them carefully. "This doesn't make sense. Why would Blake lie about something like this?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out," I said. "Why are you in California anyway? Shouldn't you be at Michigan?" Megan looked down at her coffee. "Blake convinced me to take a semester off. He said he had connections at Berkeley who could help me transfer. He's been so supportive, paying for my apartment here and everything while I wait for the paperwork to go through." Alarm bells were ringing in my head. "Has he asked you to do anything unusual?" She shifted uncomfortably. "He did ask me to meet with someone from the administration. I'm supposed to tell them about how a student sold me test answers last semester." "Let me guess," I said, my stomach sinking. "The student's name is Noah Donaldson." Her eyes widened. "How did you know?" I spent the next hour explaining everything to Megan, the lifelong competition with Blake, the cooking contest, my suspension from Berkeley. By the end, she looked horrified. "I can't believe this," she said. "Blake seemed so sweet. He told me he was helping the university catch a cheater. I had no idea." She pulled out her phone and showed me texts from Blake, coaching her on what to say to the administration. "You can't go through with this," I told her. "He's using you to frame me." Megan agreed not to meet with the administration. She even offered to help me clear my name by telling Berkeley about Blake's plan. I was grateful, but also worried about what Blake might do when he found out his plan had failed. I didn't have to wait long to find out. The next day, Megan called me in tears. "Someone broke into my apartment last night. They trashed the place and took my laptop. There was a note that just said, 'I know what you did.' Are you okay? Did you call the police?" I asked, panicking. "Yes, they took a report, but said there's not much they can do. Noah, I'm scared. I think it was Blake." I told her to stay with a friend and to block Blake on everything. Then I called Blake myself, furious. He answered with that fake, cheerful voice. "Hey, bro, what's up?" "Stay away from Megan," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know what you were trying to do." There was a pause, then Blake's voice changed completely. "You just can't let me win at anything, can you? Not even this. This isn't a game, Blake. You're hurting real people now. You brought this on yourself," he said coldly. "I warned you this was just the beginning." He hung up, leaving me even more worried than before. If he was willing to break into Megan's apartment, what else would he do? I decided I needed to warn everyone in my life about Blake. I called Casey again and told him to change our room locks and not let anyone who looked like me inside, no matter what they said. I contacted my other close friends and explained the situation. Most of them thought I was overreacting or making some weird joke, but at least they were on alert. Meanwhile, I was still trying to clear my name at Berkeley. With Megan's help, I had proof that Blake had orchestrated the cheating allegations. She forwarded me all his texts and recorded a statement explaining how he'd manipulated her. I submitted everything to the academic review board and waited. 2 weeks later, I got the email I'd been hoping for. The university had reviewed my case and found significant evidence of third-party interference. My suspension was lifted, and I was cleared of all cheating allegations. I could return to Berkeley for the next semester. I was ecstatic. I called my parents right away to share the good news. They were relieved and happy for me, though I could tell they were still struggling to believe Blake had done something so terrible. They suggested family therapy when Blake came home for summer break. I agreed, though I doubted Blake would participate. That night, I made the mistake of posting about my reinstatement on Instagram. I was just so happy to have my life back on track that I wanted to share it with friends. I didn't think about the fact that Blake might see it through a fake account or mutual friends. The next morning, I woke up to multiple missed calls from Casey. When I finally reached him, he was frantic. "Dude, there was a fire in our dorm building last night. Everyone's okay, but they're saying it was arson. Someone started it right outside our room." My blood ran cold. Was anything found? Any evidence? The police found a gas can in the bushes nearby. And you get this? It had fingerprints that matched yours. "That's impossible," I said, though I knew exactly what had happened. Blake had used his identical prints to frame me for arson. Sure enough, later that day, campus police showed up at my parents' house with a warrant for my arrest. I tried explaining about my twin brother, but they'd already checked and found that Blake had been in Michigan at the time of the fire, with multiple witnesses placing him at a study group. I spent 2 nights in jail before my parents could arrange bail. The evidence against me looked bad. My fingerprints on the gas can, my social media post that could be interpreted as celebrating my reinstatement just hours before the fire, and the fact that the fire had started right outside my own dorm room. My lawyer, a friend of my dad's named Richard, looked grim when he reviewed the case. "They're charging you with arson and attempted murder, Noah. This is serious." "I didn't do it," I insisted. "It was my twin brother. He's framing me." Richard sighed. "The twin defense is rarely successful without concrete evidence. Do you have any proof Blake was in California that night?" I didn't. Blake had created the perfect alibi for himself while setting me up to take the fall. If convicted, I was looking at years in prison. I was desperate. I needed to find proof that Blake had been in California. But how? Then I remembered something. Most airports have security cameras. If Blake had flown to California, there might be footage of him. I asked Richard to subpoena security footage from all flights between Michigan and California around the time of the fire. It was a long shot, but it was all I had. While waiting for the legal process to unfold, I stayed at my parents' house under house arrest with an ankle monitor. My mom was a wreck, constantly crying and asking how this could have happened to her boys. My dad was quieter, but I could see the pain in his eyes. One night, I overheard them arguing about Blake. My mom was defending him, saying there must be some mistake. My dad wasn't so sure anymore. The evidence Noah's lawyer found is concerning Susan. The text messages to that girl Megan, the timing of everything. What if Noah is telling the truth? But why would Blake do something so horrible? My mom cried. They're brothers. I wished I knew the answer to that question. 3 days before my trial was set to begin, Richard called with news. We got lucky. Airport security footage shows someone who looks exactly like you boarding a flight from Detroit to San Francisco the day before the fire and returning the day after. That's Blake, I said, feeling hope for the first time in weeks. It gets better, Richard continued. The person used a fake ID but paid with a credit card in Blake's name. We've also got cell tower pings showing Blake's phone in Berkeley at the time of the fire. The prosecutor dropped all charges against me the next day. The evidence clearly showed I had been framed by my identical twin. Berkeley reinstated me again, this time with a formal apology and offer of free housing for the remainder of my degree. But my nightmare wasn't over. Now, Blake was facing criminal charges for arson, fraud, and filing false reports. My parents were devastated, torn between their 2 sons. And Blake had disappeared. The police went to arrest him at Michigan, but he had already cleaned out his dorm room and vanished. His car was found abandoned at the Detroit airport. Credit card records showed he had purchased a bus ticket to Canada. But after that, the trail went cold. I returned to Berkeley for the fall semester, constantly looking over my shoulder. Blake was still out there somewhere, and I had no doubt he blamed me for ruining his life, even though he had brought it all on himself. For a few months, things were quiet. I focused on catching up with my classes and tried to move on with my life. My parents came to visit for a weekend, and for the first time since this all began, we had a nice, normal time together. We didn't talk about Blake. It was too painful for all of us. Then the emails started. Anonymous messages sent from different accounts, all with the same theme. I'm not done with you yet. You think you've won, but you haven't. Watch your back, brother. I reported them to the police, but there wasn't much they could do. The emails were sent through VPNs and temporary accounts that couldn't be traced. They advised me to be vigilant and report any suspicious activity. One day, I came back to my dorm to find my door slightly ajar. Nothing seemed to be missing, but everything felt off, like someone had been through my things. I reported it to campus security, but without evidence of a break-in, they couldn't do much either. The next week, my professor accused me of plagiarism on a paper. Someone had emailed him claiming to have written the paper for me. It took hours of going through my drafts and notes to prove the work was mine. The week after that, my car's brake lines were cut. Luckily, I noticed the leak before driving anywhere. It was clear Blake was escalating again. He was getting bolder, more dangerous. I couldn't live like this, constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering what he would do next. I decided to set a trap. I started posting on social media about a big end-of-semester party I was planning. I made it sound exclusive and important, the kind of event Blake would hate to see me hosting successfully. I was careful to include details about the location, a rental house near campus, and the date. Then I waited. The house was actually a vacant property a friend's family owned. I set up cameras covering every entrance and had Casey and a few trusted friends watching from parked cars nearby. If Blake took the bait, we'd catch him red-handed. The night of the fake party, I sat alone in the dark house, jumpy at every sound. Hours passed with nothing happening. I was starting to think my plan had failed when one of the cameras picked up movement at the back door. A hooded figure was trying to pick the lock. Even with the hood up, I recognized Blake immediately. The way he stood, the way he moved, it was like watching myself. I texted Casey, "He's here, back door. Call the police now." The lock clicked, and the door swung open. Blake stepped inside, not seeing me sitting in the darkened living room. He was carrying a backpack, which he set down carefully before unzipping it. "Hello, Blake," I said, turning on the lamp beside me. He froze, then slowly straightened up. "Noah, always one step ahead, aren't you? What's in the bag?" I asked, though I had a pretty good guess. Blake smiled that cold smile I'd come to dread. "Just some party favors. Thought I'd spice up your big event. There is no party. It was a trap, and you fell for it." His smile faltered. "Always the clever one. But you made a mistake, confronting me alone." "Who said I'm alone?" I nodded toward the window where Casey's car was visible under a streetlight. "The police are on their way. It's over, Blake." Blake lunged for his bag, but I was faster. I kicked it across the room, hearing glass break inside. The smell of gasoline immediately filled the air. "Were you going to burn down this house too?" I asked, backing toward the door. "With me in it? You don't understand," Blake said, his voice breaking slightly. "You've had everything handed to you. Everything comes easy for you. Do you know what it's like living in your shadow? Having everyone compare us and always finding me lacking?" For the first time, I saw real pain in my brother's eyes. Not just anger or resentment, but deep, genuine pain. It hit me then that while I'd been oblivious to his suffering for years, it had been eating him alive. "I never wanted to hurt you, Blake," I said quietly. "I never tried to outdo you. It just happened that way." "Liar," he shouted. "You loved it. You loved being the better twin." "No, I didn't. I loved being being your brother. I missed you when you shut me out. I was happy when you found cooking because it gave us a way to connect again. Blake shook his head, but I could see uncertainty in his eyes. It's too late for this. You ruined my life. I can't go back to Michigan. I can't go home. I'm probably going to jail because of you. Because of me? Blake, you did this to yourself. You framed me for cheating. You tried to burn down my dorm. You sent that girl to lie about me. I had to, he shouted. It was the only way to finally win. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Blake's eyes darted to the door, then back to me. It's over, I said again, softer this time. Please, don't make this worse. For a moment, I thought he might listen. Then he lunged at me, knocking me to the ground. We struggled, rolling across the floor like we used to when we were kids, wrestling in the backyard. Except this wasn't play fighting. Blake was trying to hurt me, his hands reaching for my throat. I hate you, he screamed, tears streaming down his face. I've always hated you. I managed to knee him in the stomach and push him off me. He stumbled back, tripping over his backpack and falling hard. The remaining contents spilled out, rope, duct tape, and a kitchen knife. The sight of that knife chilled me to the bone. My own twin had come prepared to kill me. Blue lights flashed through the windows as police cars pulled up outside. Blake saw them too and made a desperate dash for the back door. I didn't try to stop him. Part of me still couldn't believe my brother hated me enough to want me dead. But Blake didn't make it far. Casey and our friends had the house surrounded, and the police caught him before he could get to his car. I watched from the doorway as they handcuffed him and put him in the back of a patrol car. Our eyes met through the window, and for a second, I saw something like regret flash across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by that cold hatred I'd grown too familiar with. The police found enough evidence in Blake's backpack and car to charge him with attempted murder, breaking and entering, and violating his bail conditions from the arson case. His fake ID and disguise materials showed premeditation. As they drove away with my twin in the back seat, I sat down on the porch steps, suddenly exhausted. Casey came and sat beside me, not saying anything, just being there. I was grateful for that. What could anyone say in this situation anyway? You okay? He finally asked. No, I answered honestly. I don't think I will be for a long time. My phone rang. My parents. Someone would have to tell them their other son had just been arrested for trying to kill his twin brother. That someone was going to be me. I took a deep breath and answered the call, wondering how our family would ever recover from this. Blake's preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following week. I didn't want to attend, but my parents begged me to come. He's still your brother, my mom said, though her voice lacked conviction. Even she was having trouble holding on to that belief after everything that had happened. So I found myself sitting in a courtroom, watching as Blake was led in, wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. He didn't look at any of us, keeping his eyes fixed on the floor. The evidence against him was overwhelming. The prosecutor laid it all out. The elaborate frame job with the cheating allegations, the arson at my dorm, the false identity he'd used to travel between Michigan and California, and finally, the attempted murder at the trap house. Blake's lawyer, a public defender named James, who looked fresh out of law school, seemed overwhelmed by the case. When the judge asked Blake how he pled, he finally looked up. His eyes found mine in the gallery. Guilty, he said, his voice flat. I'm guilty of all of it. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Even the prosecutor looked surprised. My mother sobbed quietly beside me. My father put his arm around her, his face a mask of grief. The judge ordered a psychiatric evaluation before sentencing and remanded Blake to custody. As the bailiff led him away, Blake turned to look at us one last time. For a split second, I saw my brother again. Not the person consumed by hatred who had tried to destroy me, but the twin I'd grown up with. Then he was gone, through the door to the holding cells. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. The case had attracted local attention. Identical twins, one trying to frame and then kill the other. It was the kind of story people couldn't look away from. My father shielded my mother from the cameras while I pushed through the crowd to our car. Noah, how does it feel, knowing your own twin wanted you dead? One reporter shouted. I stopped and turned to face the cameras. It feels like losing a part of myself, I said honestly. Blake is my twin. Whatever he did, whatever he's become, he's still my brother. That's all I have to say. The psychiatric evaluation diagnosed Blake with severe depression, pathological jealousy, and narcissistic personality disorder. The psychiatrist's report stated that years of perceived inadequacy compared to his identical twin had warped Blake's sense of self until he could only define himself in opposition to me. In his mind, the only way he could succeed was if I failed. And when that didn't happen naturally, he decided to make it happen by force. The judge took the mental health issues into consideration, but couldn't overlook the severity and premeditation of Blake's crimes. He sentenced my brother to 8 years in prison with mandatory psychiatric treatment. I visited Blake once before they transferred him to a prison upstate. We sat across from each other in the county jail's visiting room, separated by glass. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Why did you come? Blake finally asked. Because you're my brother, I said simply. He laughed, a hollow sound. After everything I did to you, that's your answer? It's the only answer I have. Blake stared at me for a long moment. I don't understand you, Noah. I never have. You should hate me. Sometimes I do, I admitted. But mostly, I just miss who we used to be. We can never go back to that. I know. We sat in silence again. again. There was so much to say, and yet nothing that would change what had happened between us. Mom and Dad want to know if they can visit you, I said, eventually. Blake's expression hardened. Tell them not to bother. I'm not their perfect son anymore, am I? That's still you. They love you, Blake. We all do. Love, he scoffed. What good is love when you're always second best? I didn't have an answer for that. Maybe there wasn't one. As I got up to leave, Blake called my name. Noah, one more thing. I turned back. I really am a better cook than you, he said, the ghost of a smile on his lips. The judges got it wrong. It was such an absurd thing to say after everything that had happened that I couldn't help but laugh. Yeah, you probably are, I agreed. For just a moment, we were brothers again, sharing a joke that only we understood. Then the guard called time, and I had to go. As I walked out of the jail, I felt lighter somehow. Blake and I had a long, difficult road ahead of us. He had years of incarceration and therapy to get through. I had my own healing to do. Our family had been shattered and would never be quite the same. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a tiny spark of hope. That brief moment of connection, that small shared laugh, suggested that somewhere underneath all the resentment and pain, my brother was still in there. And maybe, someday, we could find our way back to each other, not as competitors, not as the better and worse twin, just as brothers. I left the jail that day with mixed feelings. On one hand, I was glad Blake and I had that small moment of connection. On the other hand, he was still going to prison for years, and our family was completely broken. I drove back to Berkeley the next day, trying to focus on finishing the semester strong, despite everything. The next few months were weirdly quiet. No more sabotage attempts, no more looking over my shoulder constantly. Just normal college life, classes, study groups, hanging out with Casey and our friends. Sometimes I'd almost forget everything that happened. Then I'd catch my reflection in a window and think of Blake locked up in prison, and it would all come rushing back. My parents were struggling hard. Mom started therapy, which was good, but Dad just threw himself into work. They visited Blake once a month, though he was still pretty cold to them according to Mom's tearful phone calls afterward. I hadn't gone back since that first visit. I wasn't ready. About 6 months after Blake's sentencing, I got a letter from him. My hands actually shook when I saw the prison return address. I sat on my bed and stared at the envelope for like 20 minutes before I worked up the courage to open it. Noah, it started. No dear or anything. Just my name. Classic Blake. The psychiatrist here says I should write to you as part of my therapy. I told her it was stupid, but she's persistent. So here I am, writing to the last person on earth I want to talk to. I've been thinking about what you said when you visited, about missing who we used to be. I've been trying to remember when things changed between us, when I started hating you instead of just being your brother. I think it was in 3rd grade. Remember Mrs. Johnson's class? She had us do those multiplication races, and you always won. Always. And everyone would cheer for you, and I'd just be the loser twin. The slower one, the dumber one. Anyway, I'm not writing to make excuses. The doctor says I need to acknowledge my actions or whatever. So here goes. I acknowledge that I tried to ruin your life. I acknowledge that I wanted to hurt you. I acknowledge that I'm messed up in the head. Don't write back. I'm just doing this for the therapy points. Blake. I read the letter like 5 times. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was something. A tiny crack in the wall Blake had built between us. I decided to write back, even though he told me not to. I kept it simple. Told him about school, about Casey's new girlfriend who made amazing brownies, about Mom and Dad. I mentioned that I'd started cooking again. Nothing fancy, just basic stuff. I didn't bring up any of the bad things that happened. I just wrote to him like a normal brother. 2 weeks later, I got another letter. This one was shorter, just a paragraph telling me to stop wasting my time writing to him. But he'd written it, which meant he'd read my letter. Progress, I guess. I kept writing every couple weeks. Sometimes Blake would respond with short, angry notes. Sometimes he wouldn't respond at all. But I didn't stop. I figured if I was persistent enough, eventually I'd wear him down. Meanwhile, I was doing pretty well at Berkeley. My professors were understanding about everything that had happened, and I managed to get my GPA back up. I even started dating this girl Riley from my economics class. She knew about Blake, everyone did after the local news coverage, but she didn't treat me like I was damaged goods, which was nice. About a year into Blake's sentence, I got a different kind of letter from him. This one was longer, less angry. Noah, the therapist says I'm making progress, whatever that means. I still have nightmares about what I did. Not guilty nightmares, more like angry ones where I'm still trying to hurt you but can't quite manage it. The doctor says that's my subconscious processing my failure to achieve my destructive goals. Sounds like BS to me, but what do I know? Mom and Dad visited yesterday. Mom cried the whole time, as usual. Dad actually talked to me though. Asked about the prison library, if I was reading anything good. It was weird, but not terrible. There's a cooking class here. Basic stuff since we can't have real knives. I signed up. The instructor says I have talent. Made me think of that stupid competition. Anyway, I still don't want your letters, but I guess they're better than nothing. Blake. I smiled when I read that last line. Definitely progress. Over the next couple years, Blake's letters gradually got less hostile. He started asking questions about my life, commenting on things I'd told him in previous letters. He even sent a birthday card once, though the message inside just said, "You're 1 year older. Congrats on continuing to exist." But coming from Blake, that was practically a hallmark sentiment. In my junior year, I got a call from my mom that changed everything. She was sobbing so hard, I could barely understand her. "Mom, slow down," I said. said. What happened? It's Blake. She managed to get out between sobs. He was attacked in the prison yard. My heart dropped into my stomach. Is he okay? He's in the prison hospital. Some inmates found out he tried to kill his own brother and decided to teach him a lesson. She broke down again. I drove straight to the prison, speeding the whole way. They had special visiting hours for inmates in the medical ward. When I walked in and saw Blake, I almost didn't recognize him. His face was swollen and bruised, one arm in a cast, bandages around his ribs. You look like crap, I said, sitting next to his bed. Blake tried to smile, but winced instead. You should see the other guys. Guys? Plural. 3 of them, he said with a hint of pride. I held my own for a while. I shook my head. Always gotta one-up me, huh? I get attacked by 1 twin, you get attacked by 3 inmates. Blake actually laughed at that, then immediately groaned in pain. Don't make me laugh, you jerk. I've broken ribs. We sat in silence for a minute. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence, though, more like we were both just processing the fact that we were having a normal conversation for the first time in years. Why did you come? Blake finally asked. After everything I did? I shrugged. You're my brother. That's what you said last time. Still true. Blake looked away. I don't deserve a brother like you. Probably not, I agreed. But you're stuck with me anyway. After that visit, things changed between us. Blake started opening up more in his letters. He told me about his therapy sessions, about the things he was learning about himself. He'd been diagnosed with several mental health issues that had gone untreated our whole lives. The prison psychiatrist was helping him work through his jealousy and anger issues. In one letter, he actually apologized, like a real apology, not a backhanded one. He wrote that he was sorry for everything he'd done, that he knew he could never make it right, but that he was trying to become someone better. I cried when I read that letter. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear those words from him. I graduated from Berkeley with honors the following year. Blake couldn't come, obviously, but I sent him photos. He wrote back, congratulating me without a hint of resentment. Another milestone. After graduation, I got a job at a tech company in San Francisco. The pay was good, and I was close enough to visit Blake more regularly. Every other weekend, I'd drive to the prison, and we'd talk for hours. Sometimes about serious stuff, sometimes just shooting the breeze like normal brothers. During one visit, Blake mentioned that he'd been thinking about what he'd do when he got out. He still had about 4 years left on his sentence, but with good behavior, he might get paroled earlier. I was thinking maybe culinary school, he said hesitantly, like he was afraid I'd laugh at him. That's perfect, I said instead. You always were the better cook. He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. Yeah, I was, wasn't I? Remember that chicken Alfredo you made that Thanksgiving? Still the best pasta I've ever had? I could teach you how to make it sometime, he offered. You know, when I'm out. I'd like that, I said, and I meant it. Blake got paroled after serving 5 years of his 8-year sentence. I was there when he walked out, along with our parents. It was awkward at first. None of us quite knew how to act. But then Blake hugged Mom, shook Dad's hand, and gave me a quick one-armed hug. Nice haircut, he said, gesturing to my new shorter style. Thanks, I replied. Figured one of us should look professional. He laughed, and just like that, the tension broke. The first few months of Blake's freedom were tough. He lived with our parents while looking for work, which wasn't easy with his criminal record. He had to check in with his parole officer regularly and continue his therapy sessions, but he seemed determined to make it work. I visited as often as I could, usually bringing Riley with me. She and Blake actually got along pretty well, which was a relief. She said she could tell we were twins, but that our personalities were completely different. Blake's the funny one, she told me once. You're more the steady, reliable type. I couldn't even argue with that assessment. About 6 months after his release, Blake got a job as a line cook at a decent restaurant. The owner was a friend of our dad's who was willing to give Blake a chance. He thrived there, eventually getting promoted to sous chef. He moved into his own apartment, started dating a waitress named Patricia, and generally seemed to be building a normal life. We still had our moments of tension. Sometimes I'd catch Blake looking at me with that old resentment, but it would pass quickly. His therapist had given him tools to manage those feelings, and he was using them. He'd take a deep breath, change the subject, sometimes even name the feeling out loud. Having a jealousy spike? Give me a minute. It was weird, but effective. 3 years after Blake's release, Riley and I got engaged. When I asked Blake to be my best man, he looked genuinely shocked. Are you serious? He asked. After everything? Who else would I ask? I said. You're my twin brother. Your twin brother who tried to destroy your life and then kill you, he pointed out. Yeah, but you're really sorry about it now, right? Blake laughed. Very sorry. Extremely sorry. Then it settled. You're my best man. The wedding was small, but perfect. Blake gave an amazing speech that had everyone alternating between laughter and tears. He made jokes about us being twins. I'm the handsome one, in case you couldn't tell. Told funny stories from our childhood and ended with something that made my throat tight. Noah has always been the forgiving one, he said, his voice getting serious. When we were kids and I'd break his toys, he'd forgive me. When I was a jerk to him in high school, he forgave me. And when I did unforgivable things as an adult, he paused, taking a deep breath. He somehow found a way to forgive me anyway. That's the kind of man my brother is. Riley, you're getting one of the good ones. After the wedding, Blake pulled me aside. I've never said this before, he said awkwardly, but I'm proud of you, Noah. Not jealous, just proud. I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged him. Life went on. Riley and I bought a house. Blake and Patricia moved in together. Our parents retired and started traveling. Normal family stuff. Blake and I still had our separate lives, different careers, different friends, different interests, but we also had a bond bond that had been tested in the most extreme way possible and somehow survived. We weren't just twins anymore. We weren't rivals. We were brothers who had been through hell and made it out the other side. Last month, Blake called me with big news. The restaurant where he worked was closing, and the owner had offered to sell it to him at a good price. He wanted to reopen it as his own place, but needed a business partner. "I know it's a lot to ask," he said, "but you've got the business background I don't have. We could call it twins or something cheesy like that. You want to go into business with me?" I asked, surprised. "Are you sure that's a good idea, given our history?" "Honestly, I don't know," Blake admitted, "but I'm willing to try if you are." I thought about it for a few days, talked it over with Riley. There were a million reasons to say no. Blake and I working together every day could bring back all those old competitive feelings. The restaurant business was risky. We could lose money, fight, ruin our rebuilt relationship. But there was one big reason to say yes. Blake was my brother, and he was asking for my help. So last week, I quit my tech job. Blake and I signed the papers for the restaurant yesterday. We're calling it Second Chances. Cheesy, like he said, but it fits. I don't know if it'll work out. Maybe we'll fail spectacularly. Maybe we'll fight and go back to hating each other, or maybe, just maybe, we'll build something great together. All I know is that after everything we've been through, we're finally on the same team. And that feels right in a way I can't really explain. Like this is where we were always supposed to end up. Not as rivals, but as partners, equals. Blake's still a better cook, though. Some things never change.